In a quiet little town in Georgia, nestled between rows of old oak trees and dusty roads, lived two siblings named Marcus and Maya Johnson. Their house wasn't big or fancy. It was just a cozy place with peeling paint on the front door and a small garden that Maya loved to tend to. Marcus, the older of the two, was 17 and about to finish high school. He had dreams of becoming an engineer, always sketching designs for bridges and buildings in his notebook during class. Maya, 15, was more into baking. Her room smelled like vanilla and cinnamon most days because she spent so much time experimenting with recipes. On a warm Friday evening, the siblings were walking home from the grocery store. They carried bags filled with flour, sugar, eggs, and other ingredients Maya needed for her latest project, a triple-layer chocolate cake. As they passed by the park near their neighborhood, something caught their attention. Sitting on a bench under the shade of a large tree was a man. His clothes looked worn, almost too big for his thin frame. There was a sadness in his eyes, but also a kind of quiet dignity, like he had once been someone important. Marcus slowed down, nudging Maya gently. "Do you see him?" he whispered. Maya nodded, her brow furrowing as she studied the man. "Yeah. Do you think he's okay?" They exchanged glances, unsure of what to do. It wasn't uncommon to see people struggling in their town. Jobs were scarce and life could be tough. But there was something about this man that made them pause. Maybe it was the way he sat so still, staring off into the distance. Or maybe it was the faint scar running along his jawline that hinted at a story worth hearing. Finally, Marcus spoke up. "We should go talk to him." Maya hesitated. "What if he doesn't want us to bother him?" "He might need help," Marcus replied firmly, "even if it's just someone to listen." With that, they approached the bench cautiously. The man didn't look up until they were standing right in front of him. When he finally did, his expression softened, though his eyes remained wary. "Can I help you kids?" he asked, his voice rough but not unkind. "Hi," Marcus began, shifting the weight of the grocery bag in his arms. "We just noticed you sitting here. Are you doing okay?" The man chuckled softly, though it lacked any real humor. "I've seen better days, sure, but I'm alive, which is more than some can say." Maya stepped forward, clutching her own bag tightly. "My name's Maya, and this is my brother Marcus. What's your name?" "Daniel," the man said, after a moment's pause. "Daniel Carter." "Well, Mr. Carter," Marcus said, trying to sound confident despite feeling a bit nervous. "Is there anything we can do for you? You look like you've had a rough time." Daniel sighed, leaning back against the bench. For a moment he seemed lost in thought, staring past them at the setting sun. Then he shook his head. "You don't need to worry about me, kid. I've been through worse. Just fell on hard times, that's all." Maya tilted her head, her curiosity piqued. "Were you in the military? Your posture, it reminds me of pictures I've seen." Daniel's lips twitched into a faint smile. Sharp eye. "Yeah, I was. Army. Did my time, got out, and now?" He trailed off, shrugging. "Now I'm figuring things out." Neither sibling knew exactly what to say to that. They stood there awkwardly for a few seconds before Maya suddenly brightened. "Wait, we're going home to bake a cake." "Well, I am. Marcus is helping. Do you like cake?" Daniel blinked, clearly taken aback by the question. "Cake?" "Yes," Maya exclaimed, already warming to the idea. "It's chocolate, triple layer, with frosting. If you promise to come by tomorrow morning, I'll save you a slice." Marcus shot her a look, silently questioning whether inviting a stranger to their house was a good idea. But Maya ignored him, her excitement bubbling over. She had always believed in the power of food to bring people together, and something about Daniel tugged at her heartstrings. To their surprise, Daniel actually smiled, a real one this time. "That's mighty kind of you, miss. I haven't had homemade cake in years." "It's settled then," Maya declared, beaming. "Come by around 10. Our house is the blue one on Maple Street. You can't miss it." As they walked away, leaving Daniel sitting on the bench, Marcus couldn't help but shake his head. "You really think he'll show up?" "Of course he will," Maya replied confidently. People don't say no to cake. The next morning, Maya woke up early, determined to make the best cake she'd ever baked. She hummed to herself as she measured out ingredients, her hands moving quickly and precisely. Marcus, still in his pajamas, wandered into the kitchen, yawning. "You're awfully cheerful for someone who stayed up late watching movies," he teased, grabbing a glass of orange juice. "I'm making magic happen," Maya shot back, grinning. "And besides, today feels special, like something good is going to happen." Marcus raised an eyebrow but didn't argue. Instead, he helped her frost the cake once it cooled, carefully smoothing out the chocolate icing. By the time they finished, it looked almost too perfect to eat. At exactly 10 o'clock, there was a knock at the door. Maya practically sprinted to answer it, pulling it open to reveal Daniel standing there. He looked cleaner than the day before, though his clothes were still the same. In one hand, he held a small bouquet of wildflowers. "I wasn't sure if flowers were appropriate," he admitted sheepishly, "but I figured it was better than showing up empty-handed." Maya laughed, stepping aside to let him in. "They're beautiful. Thank you." Inside, Daniel marveled at how warm and inviting the house felt. It wasn't much, but it was clear that love and care went into keeping it tidy. After offering him a seat at the kitchen table, Maya sliced a generous piece of cake and placed it in front of him. "Dig in," she encouraged, watching eagerly as he took his first bite. Daniel closed his eyes briefly, savoring the rich flavor. "This is incredible," he said sincerely. "Best cake I've ever had." Both siblings grinned, pleased with themselves. Over the next hour, they chatted casually, learning bits and pieces about Daniel's life. He told them stories about his time in the army, glossing over the harder parts but sharing enough to paint a picture of a man who had sacrificed a lot for his country. When it was time for him to leave, Daniel thanked them profusely. "You two have no idea how much this means to me," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "People don't usually go out of their way for folks like me." Maya shook her head. "Everyone deserves kindness, Mr. Carter. Don't forget that." As he walked away, neither Marcus nor Maya could have guessed how much their simple act of generosity would change everything, for Daniel, for themselves, and for the entire town. The next day started like any other for Marcus and Maya. The sun filtered through the curtains, casting golden streaks across their small living room. Maya was already in the kitchen, humming softly as she flipped pancakes on the stove. Marcus sat at the table, scrolling through his phone, half listening to his sister's cheerful chatter. "You know," Maya said, flipping another pancake onto a plate, "I think Daniel really liked the cake. He seemed happier when he left." Marcus nodded, though his mind was elsewhere. Something about Daniel had stuck with him. Maybe it was the way he carried himself or the sadness that lingered behind his smile. "Yeah, I think so too," Marcus replied absently. "But do you ever wonder why someone like him ended up, well, like that, on a bench in the park?" Maya paused, her spatula hovering over the pan. She hadn't thought much about it. To her, Daniel was just someone who needed kindness, and that was enough. But now that Marcus mentioned it, she realized there was more to his story than they knew. Before she could respond, there was a sharp knock at the door. Both siblings froze, exchanging puzzled glances. They weren't expecting anyone, and visitors were rare in their quiet little neighborhood. "Who is it?" Marcus called out cautiously, standing up from the table. There was no answer, only another firm knock. This time Marcus walked to the door and opened it, revealing two men standing on the porch. They wore crisp uniforms, their badges gleaming in the sunlight. One of them, a tall man with short brown hair, introduced himself as Lieutenant Ryan. The other, shorter and stockier, was Sergeant Adams. "Good morning," Lieutenant Ryan said politely, though his tone was serious. "Are you Marcus and Maya Johnson?" Marcus hesitated before nodding. "Yeah, that's us. What's this about?" The officers exchanged a glance before Ryan continued. "We're looking for a man named Daniel Carter. Do you know him?" Maya stepped forward, her curiosity outweighing her nerves. "Yes, we met him yesterday. Why? Is something wrong?" Ryan's expression softened slightly. "Nothing dangerous, don't worry. Mr. Carter is a veteran. and we've been trying to locate him to offer assistance. He mentioned that two kind kids gave him a cake. We figured it might be you." Marcus frowned, unsure whether to believe them. "How did you even find us?" Sergeant Adams spoke up this time, his voice calm but firm. "We checked nearby areas. Based on his description of your house, it wasn't hard to narrow it down." Maya glanced at Marcus, silently asking what they should do. She wanted to trust these men. They looked official, and their concern for Daniel seemed genuine. But something about the situation felt off. "Well," Marcus began slowly, "we did meet him. He came by yesterday morning for cake, but he didn't say much about where he was staying." Lieutenant Ryan nodded, jotting something down in a small notepad. "Do you remember anything else, any details he might have shared?" Maya thought back to their conversation. "He said he used to be in the army and he mentioned having a hard time since he got out." The officers exchanged another glance, this one harder to read. "Thank you," Ryan said finally. "You've been very helpful. If you see him again, please let us know. We're here to help." With that, the two men turned and walked back to their car, leaving Marcus and Maya standing awkwardly in the doorway. As the vehicle drove away, Maya closed the door and leaned against it, exhaling deeply. "That was weird," she muttered. Marcus nodded, his brow furrowed. "Yeah, really weird." Later that afternoon, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. He tried to distract himself by working on a school project, but his thoughts kept drifting back to the officer's visit. Why would the military care so much about finding Daniel? And why had they come all the way to their house just because of a cake? Curiosity got the better of him. Grabbing his laptop, he sat down at the kitchen table and started searching online. He typed phrases like veterans missing and military classified units, hoping to find some answers. Most of the results were vague or unrelated, but one article caught his eye. It talked about veterans who had gone off-grid after leaving the service, often due to trauma or distrust of the government. "Maya," Marcus called out, waving her over. "Look at this." Maya peered at the screen, reading the article quickly. Her eyes widened. "Do you think Daniel is one of those people? Someone who doesn't trust the system anymore?" "It's possible," Marcus replied, rubbing the back of his neck. "But if he's hiding, why would the military still be looking for him?" Before they could discuss it further, Maya noticed something strange outside the window. A dark sedan was parked across the street, its engine running. Two men sat inside, neither moving nor talking. They seemed to be watching the house. "Marcus," Maya whispered, tugging on his sleeve. "Look." Marcus followed her gaze, his stomach sinking. The car hadn't been there earlier, and the men inside definitely weren't neighbors. "Stay here," he instructed, grabbing his phone. He snapped a quick picture of the car, just in case, then pulled the curtain shut. "What do we do?" Maya asked, her voice trembling slightly. "I don't know," Marcus admitted, "but I don't like this, not one bit." That night, sleep didn't come easily for either sibling. Every creak of the house made them jump. Every shadow outside the window seemed suspicious. By morning, they were both exhausted, but determined to figure out what was going on. Maya decided to bake again. It always helped her think clearly. This time she made cookies, filling the house with the comforting scent of chocolate chips and vanilla. Marcus, meanwhile, spent hours poring over more articles and forums, searching for anything that might explain the officer's interest in Daniel. Around noon, there was another knock at the door. This time, it was Daniel. He looked worse than before, his face pale and drawn, his hands shaking slightly as he held onto the railing of the porch. "I need your help," he said hoarsely, his eyes darting around nervously. Marcus ushered him inside quickly, closing the door behind him. "What happened?" he asked, his voice low. Daniel sank into a chair at the kitchen table, running a hand through his disheveled hair. "I messed up," he confessed. "I trusted the wrong people, and now they're coming for me." Maya set a plate of cookies in front of him, her heart pounding. "Who's coming for you?" "The same ones who sent those officers to your door," Daniel replied grimly. "They're not here to help me. They want something I have, and they won't stop until they get it." Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. What do they want? Daniel hesitated, clearly debating how much to tell them. Finally, he sighed. Information. Classified stuff. Things I shouldn't have taken when I left the service. But I couldn't let them use it. Not the way they planned. Maya's mind raced. She didn't fully understand what Daniel was talking about, but she could see the fear in his eyes. Whatever he was involved in, it was dangerous. So what do we do? Marcus asked, leaning forward. If they're already watching us, we can't stay here. Daniel nodded. You're right, I shouldn't have come. But I didn't know who else to turn to. Maya placed a reassuring hand on his arm. It's okay. We'll figure this out together. For the first time since meeting him, Daniel smiled, a faint, grateful smile. Thank you, he whispered. Both of you. As the three of them sat in the kitchen, plotting their next move, Marcus couldn't help but feel like their lives had changed forever. What started as a simple act of kindness had spiraled into something far bigger and far more dangerous than they could have imagined. The kitchen was quiet except for the faint ticking of the clock on the wall. Daniel sat slumped in his chair, looking like a man carrying the weight of the world on his shoulders. Marcus and Maya exchanged worried glances. They had always been close, but now they were bound together by something much bigger than themselves, something dangerous. So, Marcus began, breaking the silence. What exactly are we dealing with here? Who are these people after you? Daniel hesitated, his hands gripping the edge of the table. He seemed to be choosing his words carefully. It's not just one group, he finally said. There's the military, sure, but there's also others, people who want what I have. Classified files, secrets, things that could get a lot of powerful people in trouble if they got out. Maya frowned, her mind racing. But why would they come after us? We don't even know what's in those files. They think I trust you, Daniel explained. If I'm hiding, they'll assume I've told you something. Or at least that you might know where I am. That makes you targets too. Marcus felt a cold knot form in his stomach. He had suspected something like this, but hearing it out loud made it feel real. Too real. What do we do? He asked, his voice steady despite the fear creeping into his chest. Daniel leaned forward, his expression serious. First, we need to get out of this house. It's not safe here anymore. Those men outside, they're watching. Waiting. Maya glanced nervously toward the window. The dark sedan was still parked across the street, its occupants unmoving. She shivered. Where can we go? I know a place, Daniel said. An old friend of mine owns a cabin deep in the woods. No one knows about it except me and him. We can lay low there for a while. Marcus nodded slowly. Okay. But how do we get there without being followed? That's where you two come in, Daniel replied. You know this town better than I do. If we plan carefully, we can lose them. Over the next hour, the three of them huddled around the kitchen table, sketching out a plan. Maya suggested using their bikes to sneak out, through the back alleys, avoiding the main roads where the sedan might spot them. Marcus agreed, adding that they should split up temporarily to throw off anyone tailing them. We'll meet at the edge of the woods, Marcus said, pointing to a spot on the map they had pulled from a drawer. From there, Daniel can lead us to the cabin. What about supplies? Maya asked. We can't just leave with nothing. Daniel nodded. Good point. Pack light but practical, food, water, warm clothes, and anything you might need if we're stuck there for a few days. As they worked, Maya couldn't help but notice how calm Daniel seemed despite everything. It was like he'd done this kind of thing before, which only made her more curious and more scared. What had he gotten himself into? By late afternoon, they were ready. Maya stuffed a backpack with snacks, bottled water, and a first aid kit she found under the bathroom sink. Marcus grabbed a flashlight, a pocket knife, and an old blanket in case it got cold at night. Daniel kept watch by the window, his eyes scanning the street for any sign of movement. Let's move, Daniel said quietly as the sun began to dip below the horizon. Now's our best chance. They slipped out the back door, hearts pounding, as they mounted their bikes. The air was cool and the shadows stretched long across the ground. Maya led the way, pedaling quickly down narrow paths and cutting through empty lots. Behind her, Marcus followed closely, keeping an eye out for anyone suspicious. At one point, Maya glanced over her shoulder and saw headlights turning onto their street. Her breath caught in her throat. "They're coming," she whispered urgently. "Keep going," Marcus urged, his voice barely audible. They sped up, weaving through the maze of alleys until they reached the edge of the woods. There, they hid their bikes behind a cluster of bushes and waited for Daniel to catch up. When he arrived a few minutes later, he looked relieved. "Good job," he said, nodding approvingly. "Now let's keep moving." The forest was dark and eerily quiet as they ventured deeper, guided only by the dim beam of Marcus's flashlight. Twigs snapped underfoot, and the occasional rustle of leaves made them jump. Maya clutched her backpack tightly, trying to ignore the unease building in her chest. After what felt like hours, they finally reached the cabin. It was small and weathered, almost blending into the trees around it. A faint trail of smoke curled from the chimney, indicating someone was inside. Daniel knocked softly on the door, and a moment later, it creaked open. A tall, wiry man with graying hair stood there, his face lighting up when he saw Daniel. "I wasn't sure you'd make it," he said, stepping aside to let them in. "This is Jack," Daniel introduced. "An old buddy from the service. Jack, these are Marcus and Maya. They've been helping me." Jack nodded, offering them a tired smile. "Any friend of Daniel's is welcome here. Come on in." Inside, the cabin was cozy but sparsely furnished. A fire crackled in the hearth, casting flickering shadows on the walls. Jack gestured for them to sit while he poured mugs of hot tea. As they sipped the warm drink, Daniel filled Jack in on everything that had happened. The officers at the tower, the car outside their house, and the decision to flee. Jack listened intently, his brow furrowed. When Daniel finished, he sighed heavily. "This is bad, Danny. Real bad. If they're willing to chase you this far, they're not going to stop anytime soon." "I know," Daniel admitted. "But we can't let them win, not this time." Marcus cleared his throat, drawing everyone's attention. "What happens now? Do we just stay here forever?" "No," Daniel replied firmly. "We regroup, figure out our next move. But first we need to make sure you two are safe." Maya frowned. "Safe? How are we supposed to be safe when people are following us everywhere?" Jack leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "Here's the thing," he said. "You're already involved. Whether you like it or not, those people out there see you as part of this mess. Sooner or later, they'll try to use you to get to Daniel." Maya's hands trembled slightly as she set her mug down. "Then what do we do?" "We fight back," Daniel said simply. "Not with guns or violence, but with proof. If we can expose what they're doing, they won't have any leverage left." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "Expose them how?" "You said yourself the files are classified," Daniel nodded. "That's true. But there are ways to get the truth out without blowing everything wide open. We just need to be smart about it." For the rest of the evening, they talked strategy. Jack suggested reaching out to a journalist friend of his who specialized in investigative reporting. Daniel agreed, saying it might be their best shot at getting the word out safely. Meanwhile, Marcus and Maya brainstormed ways to document their movements and gather evidence without putting themselves in further danger. As the fire died down and exhaustion took hold, Maya curled up on a makeshift bed of blankets near the hearth. Marcus sat beside her, staring into the dying embers. "You okay?" he asked softly. She shrugged, pulling the blanket tighter around her shoulders. "I don't know. This feels so unreal, like a movie or something." Marcus smiled faintly. "Yeah, I know. But we've got each other, and Daniel and Jack. We'll figure it out." Maya nodded, though she wasn't entirely convinced. Still, she closed her eyes and tried to focus on the warmth of the fire and the sound of her brother's steady breathing. For now, that was enough. Outside, the wind whispered through the trees, carrying with it the promise of challenges yet to come. But for the first time since the officers had shown up at their door, Marcus and Maya felt a glimmer of hope. Whatever happened next, they would face it together. and maybe, just maybe, they could turn the tide in their favor. The next morning, the cabin was quiet except for the sound of birds chirping outside. Maya woke up first, her body stiff from sleeping on the hard floor. She stretched carefully, trying not to disturb Marcus, who was still asleep beside her. The events of the past few days felt like a blur, like a dream she couldn't quite shake off. But as she looked around the small cabin and saw Daniel sitting by the window, staring out into the woods, she knew it was all real. Daniel turned when he heard her stir. "Morning," he said softly, his voice tired but kind. "Sleep okay?" Maya nodded, though it wasn't entirely true. Her mind had been racing all night, replaying every detail of their escape and wondering what would happen next. "Not really," she admitted. "But I'm okay." Daniel smiled faintly. "You're braver than you think. You know that?" Before Maya could respond, Marcus stirred, rubbing his eyes as he sat up. "What time is it?" he mumbled groggily. "Early," Daniel replied. "We need to get moving soon. Jack's gone to check the roads. He'll be back in an hour or so." Marcus frowned. "Check the roads for what?" "To make sure we're not walking into a trap," Daniel explained. "If they followed us this far, they might already know about the cabin." That thought sent a chill through Maya. She hadn't considered that their safe haven might not actually be safe at all. "What if they do know?" she asked nervously. "What then?" "Then we fight," Daniel said firmly, but not recklessly. "We have to stay one step ahead of them." By the time Jack returned, everyone was awake and tense. He burst through the door, his face pale and his breathing heavy. "They're close," he said without preamble. "I saw tire tracks leading toward the trailhead. They'll be here within the hour." Daniel swore under his breath, standing quickly. "Pack up, we can't stay here." Maya's heart sank. She had hoped they'd have more time to rest, to think things through, but now they were being pushed again. "Where do we go?" she asked, her voice trembling. "There's another spot. A hunting shack deeper in the woods," Jack replied. "It's risky, but it's our best bet." Without wasting another second, they grabbed their belongings and headed out. The air was colder than before, and the sky was overcast, casting everything in a dull gray light. As they moved through the forest, the silence was oppressive, broken only by the crunch of leaves beneath their feet. Jack led the way, his movements quick and deliberate. Marcus stayed close behind him, holding the flashlight tightly even though it was daytime. Maya walked beside Daniel, who kept glancing over his shoulder, his hand resting on the pocket knife he carried. After nearly 2 hours of hiking, they reached the shack. It was even smaller than the cabin, barely large enough to fit all 4 of them. Still, it offered some protection, and they wasted no time barricading the door with logs and branches. "We'll wait here," Daniel said, his voice low. "See if they pass us by." For the next hour, they sat in tense silence, listening for any sign of movement outside. Maya hugged her knees to her chest, trying to steady her breathing. Every rustle of leaves made her jump. Every distant sound felt like footsteps closing in. Suddenly, there was a noise, a soft creak, like someone stepping on a branch nearby. Maya froze, her eyes wide. Daniel held up a hand, signaling for everyone to stay quiet. Then came voices, faint but unmistakable. "They're here," Marcus whispered, his voice barely audible. Daniel nodded grimly. "Stay down. Don't make a sound." The voices grew louder, closer. Maya could hear them talking, though she couldn't make out the words. Her heart pounded so loudly she was sure they'd hear it too. Beside her, Marcus gripped the flashlight like a weapon, his knuckles white. Then, just as suddenly as they had arrived, the voices faded. Footsteps retreated into the distance, leaving the forest eerily silent once more. "They didn't find us," Jack said after a long moment, his shoulders sagging with relief. "For now," Daniel added darkly. "But they'll keep looking. We need to move again before nightfall." As the sun began to set, they left the shack, heading in the opposite direction of where their pursuers had gone. The woods grew darker and more treacherous, forcing them to slow their pace. Maya stumbled several times, her legs aching from the constant walking, but she refused to complain. She knew they couldn't afford to stop. Eventually, they reached a clearing where a narrow dirt road cut through the trees. Daniel studied it carefully, his brow furrowed. "This road leads to town," he said. "If we follow it, we should be able to flag down a car, or at least find help." "But won't they expect us to head back to town?" Marcus asked, frowning. "Isn't that too obvious?" "It is," Daniel admitted. "But right now we don't have many options. Staying in the woods isn't safe anymore." Reluctantly, they agreed to take the risk. They walked along the edge of the road, sticking to the shadows as much as possible. After what felt like forever, they spotted headlights in the distance. "Get ready," Daniel instructed. "When the car gets closer, step into the road and wave it down." Maya's stomach churned with nerves. What if the driver wasn't friendly? What if it was one of their pursuers? But before she could voice her fears, the car slowed to a stop, a few feet away. The driver rolled down the window, revealing a middle-aged woman with a kind face. "Are you kids okay?" she asked, concern evident in her tone. "We're fine," Marcus said quickly, stepping forward. "But we need help. Can you take us to the nearest gas station?" The woman hesitated, glancing at Daniel and Jack suspiciously. "Who are these men?" she asked, her voice cautious. "They're friends," Maya interjected, giving the woman her most sincere smile. "Please, we wouldn't ask if it wasn't important." After a moment, the woman nodded. "All right. Get in." The ride to the gas station was short but nerve-wracking. None of them spoke, unsure of whether they could trust the driver. When they finally arrived, Daniel thanked her profusely and handed her a folded bill. "For your trouble," he said. Once, the car drove off. They gathered near a payphone outside the station. Daniel dialed a number from memory, pacing anxiously as the line rang. Finally, someone answered. "It's me," Daniel said urgently. "I need your help. Can you meet us?" There was a pause, then a voice on the other end replied. "Where are you?" Daniel gave their location and hung up. Turning to the others, he exhaled deeply. "That was Sarah," he explained. "She's a journalist," Jack mentioned. "If anyone can help us expose this mess, it's her." "How long until she gets here?" Marcus asked, leaning against the wall. "A couple of hours," Daniel replied. "We'll lay low until then." The wait felt endless. They huddled together, in the corner of the parking lot, keeping an eye on the road. Maya dozed off briefly, only to wake up startled by the sound of approaching headlights. This time, it was a van pulling into the lot. A woman stepped out, her sharp features softened by a warm smile. "Daniel?" she called out. "That's her," Daniel confirmed, waving her over. "Sarah, thank you for coming." Sarah nodded, her expression serious. "Tell me everything." For the next hour, Daniel recounted the entire story, from the files he had taken to the people chasing him. Marcus and Maya listened intently, piecing together the bigger picture. By the time he finished, Sarah was scribbling notes furiously. "This is huge," she said finally. "If we play this right, we can blow the lid off the whole operation." "But how do we stay safe?" Maya asked, her voice trembling. "What if they come after us again?" Sarah placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "Leave that to me. I have contacts who can protect you. But first, we need to act fast." With Sarah's guidance, they formulated a new plan. Using her resources, she would leak parts of the story to trusted outlets while arranging for Daniel and the siblings to enter protective custody. It wasn't perfect, but it was their best shot. As they climbed into Sarah's van, Maya glanced at Marcus, her eyes filled with determination. "We're going to make it through this," she said quietly. Marcus smiled, though it didn't quite reach his eyes. "Yeah, together." And for the first time in days, Maya believed it. The ride to Sarah's safe house was long and tense. Maya sat in the back seat of the van, staring out the window as the scenery blurred past. Fields gave way to dense forests, then to quiet suburban streets lined with houses that looked eerily similar to her own. Every passing car made her heart skip a beat, but Sarah assured them they were far from anyone who might be following. We're almost there, Sarah said finally, breaking the silence. Her voice was calm but firm, like someone who had been through situations like this before. Just hang on a little longer. Maya nodded, though she wasn't sure how much more hanging on she could do. The past few days felt like years, and exhaustion was starting to take its toll. Marcus seemed just as drained, his head resting against the seat as he stared blankly ahead. Even Daniel, usually so composed, looked worn down, his hands gripping the edge of the seat tightly. When they finally arrived at the safe house, a small, unassuming brick building tucked away at the end of a cul-de-sac, Sarah parked the van and turned off the engine. "This is it," she said, glancing over her shoulder at them. "No one knows about this place except me and a few trusted people. You'll be safe here while we work out the next steps." They climbed out of the van cautiously, their eyes scanning the area for any signs of trouble. The neighborhood was quiet, almost too quiet, but there was something comforting about the ordinary look of it all. It reminded Maya of home, even if she knew they weren't truly safe yet. Inside, the safe house was simple but clean. A couch and a couple of chairs filled the living room, while a small kitchen occupied one corner. There were no personal touches, no photos or decorations, but it didn't matter. After everything they'd been through, it felt like a sanctuary. "You can rest here tonight," Sarah said, gesturing toward the couch. "Tomorrow we'll start making calls and putting the pieces together." Daniel nodded gratefully. "Thank you, Sarah. We couldn't have done this without you." Sarah smiled faintly, though there was a seriousness in her eyes. "Don't thank me yet. This isn't over. Not by a long shot." That night, Maya lay awake on the couch, staring at the ceiling. Despite the relative safety of the safe house, her mind wouldn't stop racing. She kept replaying the events of the past few days. The officers at their door, the men in the sedan, the frantic escape through the woods. Each memory brought a fresh wave of fear and uncertainty. "Can't sleep?" Marcus asked quietly from the other side of the room. He was stretched out on the floor using his backpack as a pillow. "No," Maya admitted, rolling onto her side to face him. "I keep thinking about what happens next. What if they find us? What if they hurt Mom and Dad because of us?" Marcus sighed, sitting up slightly. "I've been thinking about that too, but we can't focus on the what-ifs. We just have to trust that Sarah knows what she's doing." "I hope you're right," Maya whispered, her voice barely audible. "So do I," Marcus replied, lying back down. "But for now, try to get some rest. We'll figure it out tomorrow." Easier said than done, Maya thought bitterly. Still, she closed her eyes and tried to focus on the sound of Marcus's steady breathing. Eventually, sleep found her, though it was restless and filled with uneasy dreams. The next morning, Sarah wasted no time getting to work. She set up a laptop on the kitchen table and began typing furiously, her fingers flying across the keyboard. "First things first," she said, glancing up at the group. "We need to verify the information Daniel gave me. If we're going to expose this, we have to make sure it's ironclad." Daniel nodded, pulling a small USB drive from his pocket. "Everything's on here," he said, handing it to her. "Files, documents, recordings, you name it. It's all there." Sarah plugged the drive into the laptop and began sifting through its contents. Her expression grew darker with each file she opened. "This is worse than I thought," she muttered under her breath. "Corruption, illegal operations, cover-ups, it's all here." "What does it mean?" Maya asked nervously, leaning forward. "It means," Sarah replied, closing the laptop and looking at them, "that we have enough to blow this wide open. But we have to be smart about it. Releasing everything at once could put us all in danger." "So, what's the plan?" Marcus asked, his brow furrowed. Sarah leaned back in her chair, thinking carefully. "We release bits and pieces strategically, to journalists, whistleblowers, watchdog organizations. That way the story builds momentum slowly, and they can't shut it down all at once." "And what about us?" Daniel asked, his voice strained. "What happens when they realize where the leaks are coming from?" "That's why we're arranging protective custody for all of you," Sarah explained. You'll be relocated temporarily until the dust settles. It won't be easy, but it's the only way to keep you safe. Maya exchanged a worried glance with Marcus. Relocation sounded scary, leaving behind everything familiar, starting over somewhere new. But deep down she knew it was necessary. They had seen firsthand what these people were capable of, and staying put wasn't an option anymore. Later that day, Sarah made several phone calls, coordinating with contacts across the country. By evening, she had secured temporary housing for the group in a different state. It's not glamorous, she warned, but it's secure, and most importantly, it's far from here. When do we leave? Marcus asked, already dreading the answer. First thing tomorrow morning, Sarah replied. I'll drive you myself, we can't risk any delays. As the reality of leaving sank in, Maya felt a lump form in her throat. She wandered into the living room and sat down on the couch, staring at the wall. Marcus joined her after a moment, sitting beside her in silence. This feels so unreal, Maya said finally, her voice trembling. Like none of this should be happening. I know, Marcus replied, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder, but we're in this together, okay? No matter what happens, we'll face it side by side. Maya nodded, blinking back tears. What about Mom and Dad? Shouldn't we tell them something? We will, Marcus promised. Once we're settled in the new place, we'll figure out how to contact them safely. But for now, we can't risk putting them in danger. Before they could say anything else, Sarah walked in, holding a map. Here's the plan, she said, spreading it out on the coffee table. We'll take back roads and avoid major highways. If anyone tries to follow us, we'll lose them easily. Daniel studied the map carefully, nodding in approval. Good. Let's stick to the plan. Early the next morning, they packed up their belongings and prepared to leave. The air was crisp and cold, and the sky was still dark as they loaded into Sarah's van. Maya hugged herself tightly, trying to ward off the chill and the growing sense of unease in her chest. As they pulled away from the safe house, Maya glanced back one last time. For better or worse, this chapter of their lives was ending. Ahead of them lay uncertainty, danger, and the possibility of a brighter future if they could survive long enough to see it. The drive was long and silent, broken only by the occasional hum of the engine or the crunch of tires on gravel roads. Maya dozed off intermittently, waking up every time the van hit a bump or took a sharp turn. Each time she looked around anxiously, half expecting to see headlights trailing behind them. But no one followed. By late afternoon, they reached their destination, a small apartment complex nestled in the outskirts of a bustling city. It was nothing fancy, but it offered anonymity and security, two things they desperately needed. This is it, Sarah said as they climbed out of the van. Your new home, for now at least. Maya looked up at the building, her heart heavy, with conflicting emotions. Fear, relief, determination. They all swirled together inside her, making it hard to breathe. But as she caught Marcus's eye, she forced a small smile. We made it, she said softly. For now, Marcus replied, echoing Sarah's earlier words. But we're not done yet. And he was right. While the immediate threat had passed, the fight was far from over. Together they would uncover the truth, expose the corruption, and reclaim their lives, one step at a time. The apartment Sarah had arranged for them was small but functional. It had 2 bedrooms, a tiny kitchen, and a living room with peeling wallpaper and creaky floorboards. Maya stood in the middle of the main room, clutching her backpack tightly as she looked around. The place smelled faintly of dust and old furniture, but it felt like a fortress compared to where they'd been just days before. This will work, Daniel said finally, breaking the silence. His voice was calm, but there was an edge of exhaustion in it that made Maya's heart ache. For now, Sarah nodded, setting down the bag she had carried inside. It's not perfect, but it's safe. I've already arranged for groceries to be delivered later today, so you won't need to leave unless absolutely necessary. Marcus walked over to the window and peeked through the blinds. Outside, the street was quiet, just a few cars passing by and neighbors going about their business. No one seemed to notice the newcomers. How long do we stay here? He asked without turning around. As long as it takes, Sarah replied. She pulled out her phone and started typing something quickly. I'm sending the first batch of documents to my contacts this evening. Once the story starts gaining traction, we'll have more leverage, but until then, keep your heads down. Maya sat down on the couch, feeling the weight of everything pressing down on her shoulders. What if they find us anyway? What if none of this works? It will, Sarah said firmly, sitting beside her. But even if things get worse before they get better, remember why you're doing this. You're not just fighting for yourselves. You're fighting for everyone who's been hurt by what these people have done. That thought gave Maya a flicker of strength. She wasn't used to being brave, but she knew Sarah was right. They couldn't back down now, not after coming so far. Over the next few days, life fell into a strange rhythm. Sarah visited regularly, bringing updates about the investigation and news of how the leaked documents were spreading online. Journalists began picking up the story, asking questions that no one in power wanted to answer. Public outrage grew slowly but steadily, fueled by evidence that couldn't be ignored. Meanwhile, Marcus and Maya tried to adjust to their new reality. They spent most of their time indoors, playing card games or watching TV to pass the hours. Sometimes, Maya baked cookies using ingredients from the grocery deliveries, filling the apartment with the comforting scent of chocolate chips and vanilla. Even Daniel joined in occasionally, teaching them tricks he'd learned during his time in the army: how to tie secure knots, how to navigate using only the stars. Despite the tension hanging over them, those moments brought a sense of normalcy that Maya desperately needed. For a little while, she could almost forget the danger lurking outside. One afternoon, Sarah arrived with news that sent a jolt of hope through the group. "They're starting to investigate," she announced, her face glowing with excitement. "Congressional hearings are being scheduled. People high up are scrambling to cover their tracks." Daniel let out a breath he seemed to have been holding for weeks. "Finally. But we're not out of the woods yet," Sarah warned, her tone serious again. "If anything, this is when they'll fight back the hardest. We need to stay vigilant." A week later, the first real test came. A knock at the door startled everyone mid-afternoon. Maya froze, her hand halfway to the cookie jar. Marcus stood up immediately, moving to block the entrance. "Who is it?" he called out cautiously. "It's me," came Jack's voice from the other side. "Open up, I've got something important." Relieved but still wary, Marcus unlocked the door and let him in. Jack looked exhausted, his clothes rumpled and his eyes bloodshot. He carried a folder under his arm, which he handed directly to Daniel. "They know where you are," Jack said bluntly. "Not exactly, but they're close. Someone tipped them off." Daniel swore under his breath. "How much time do we have?" "Not much," Jack admitted grimly. "A day, maybe 2. After that, they'll figure it out." Sarah stepped forward, her mind racing. "Then we move again, tonight." "No," Daniel interrupted. "Enough running. If we keep disappearing, they'll never stop chasing us. It's time to end this." "How?" Marcus asked, his voice tight with fear. "By giving them exactly what they don't want, a public showdown." Daniel turned to Sarah. "Can you set up a press conference? Somewhere secure? Somewhere visible?" Sarah hesitated, clearly weighing the risks. "It's risky, but yes, I can make it happen." The next morning, the group gathered in a rented conference room at a local hotel. Reporters filled the seats, cameras flashing as Daniel stepped up to the podium. Maya and Marcus stood off to the side, their hearts pounding as they watched the man who had become like family take center stage. "For years," Daniel began, his voice steady despite the storm of emotions swirling inside him, "I served my country faithfully, believing in its values and its promise. But what I discovered after leaving the military shattered that belief. What I hold in my hands, and what has been shared with trusted journalists, is proof of corruption at the highest levels: illegal operations, cover-ups, betrayals of trust." The room erupted into murmurs, reporters scribbling furiously in their notebooks. Daniel continued, his words cutting through the noise. "I didn't come here seeking revenge. I came here because the truth deserves to be told, because the people deserve to know." When he finished speaking, the room was silent for a moment before erupting into chaos. Questions flew from every direction, but Daniel remained composed, answering, each one with precision and care. As the press conference ended, Maya felt tears streaming down her face. She hadn't realized how much she needed to hear those words, to see someone standing up against the darkness that had chased them for so long. In the weeks that followed, the fallout was immense. Investigations expanded, leading to arrests and resignations at the highest levels. The story dominated headlines, sparking nationwide conversations about accountability and transparency. Slowly but surely, the tide began to turn. For Marcus and Yahoo,